So, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Cody Armstrong, and today we're going to talk about the newly announced Onshape App Store. And we're going to focus on all the details of how to get to the App Store, how to get to apps and use them, and all the little details necessary to get you using the Onshape App Store. As I always say with these webinars, we really encourage you to ask any questions that you may have. If you have a questions dialogue and you go to webinar panel, feel free to type anything in. I'll do my best to stop and address them from time to time. I also have help in this webinar, so really encourage you to ask any questions you may have as we're going through this. It's going to be a short webinar today. I'm not going to necessarily focus on how to use any one individual app, more of how to get started using the apps. You know, the process, using the App Store, installing or authenticating an app, and those kinds of things. So introduction to the Onshape App Store. I hope you're excited. We're really excited about the App Store and its launch. There are a few things I'd like to mention about Onshape in general before I get into the topic of the day. And the first is our mission, and that is getting everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere. And this includes mobile devices, this includes Mac, Linux, Chromebooks, Windows, and now it's extending beyond CAD with the App Store. So getting everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere, that's our goal, and we're just growing more and more with the announcement of the App Store. So some other things I like to point out, if you're new to Onshape, you haven't tried it out yet, we do consider ourselves professional 3D CAD. And when you think of professional 3D CAD, it's really three categories: parts, assemblies, and of course, drawings. And we do have all three major pieces that make up a professional 3D CAD system. And I think you'll see that, Onshape is a bit different than traditional CAD systems in that we're laser focused on updating those three major pieces very fast. So you're going to see new functionality being added constantly, and us evolving very, very quickly. So professional 3D CAD, we have all three major pieces, and unlike a lot of traditional CAD systems out there, you don't have to do anything for updates. You'll see new functionality being added roughly every 3 weeks. So some other things I like to mention: with Onshape, version controls built in. You don't have to have a separate data management system or some other solution to control versions of your CAD data. All of that's integrated into Onshape. Also, if you're coming from another CAD system, or if you have a need to import or export common CAD formats that are out there, we support most. So just give it a shot. Try importing a document, or again, try exporting. You'll see a long list of supported file formats. So again, Onshape's a great tool if you're working alongside an existing CAD system, or if you're just looking for maybe a cloud-based tool to view or back up your data. It works well in all of those situations. The last thing I want to mention is with Onshape, we've introduced entirely new methods of collaboration. So if you haven't shared your document yet, I definitely recommend it. The real-time collaboration with users, the comment capabilities, the follow mode, all these things are real impressive capabilities that we really haven't been able to do in CAD before. So just some things I'd like to highlight. Now, of course, the App Store that we're announcing is kind of the icing on the cake of this. Our focus is 3D CAD, but we have all these partners that focus on their niche in the industry, whether it's finite element analysis or fluid dynamics, and we wanted to be able to integrate them in so that Onshape becomes a complete solution for you. So that's the idea behind the App Store. And what I'm going to do today is primarily focus on just introducing, what the App Store is, how do you get to it, explain different app categories and types, and then also the process of actually using an app, authenticating, where do I access it, what kind of options do I have, those kinds of things. As I mentioned before, I'd like to answer any questions that you have. So feel free to type in any questions into the questions dialog, and you go to webinar control there, and I'll do my best to stop and address them from time to time. As I mentioned, short webinar. We're really just going to focus on how to get around in the App Store and how to use it. So some things before we get started. Now, there are a few things to keep in mind about why we did the App Store. There's a few important things that I always like to mention about the App Store. And one of the first is, that it's one of a true try and buy marketplace. And we use that term a lot here, but it allows you to go in and try an app out for free and choose later whether or not you want to buy it. So if you're familiar with the Google Play Store or, the Apple App Store, it's a very similar environment. You go to one place and you can see all the apps associated or that can work with Onshape. So we wanted to give the user one place. We also wanted it to be very affordable. And so you're going to see in just a bit when we start talking about the pricing schemes and things like that, that it was very important for us to be able to give the user access to these tools, even, as a hobbyist or a one-time user or someone that doesn't, frequently use them. So those were our goals in introducing the App Store. We really wanted to get the average user out there and easily able to do renderings or finite element analysis or fluid dynamics or CAM, whatever it is you need to accomplish with your CAD data. So my goal today, introduce it. We're going to explain the different app categories that we have. So we have a number of different apps available to you, as 28 as of today. Explain the different app types, and then of course authentication. Now, authentication I'm going to cover in just a bit, but it's basically our way of allowing access for an app to render, for example, or to run a study. So let's jump into it now. What is the Onshape App Store? Well, it's a marketplace. Think of it as the Google Play Store, the Apple iTunes Store. You have the same environment. You can go through the different apps, and you have descriptions, product screenshots. It's a very similar environment if you're familiar with one of those types of interfaces. So some things to point out, we have a number of different apps. We have a lot of apps that we launched with. We're very excited about it. 28 apps as of today for rendering, finite element analysis, fluid dynamics, CAM, parts libraries, utilities, all kinds of neat stuff is being integrated into Onshape. And this is just as of launch. This is another area that we're going to move very quickly. You're going to see a lot of new apps being added over the year, and we hope this is one of these areas that just explodes with growth. So the last thing I want to mention, I've already briefly mentioned it, is that all the apps have some sort of free offering, and this is a very important thing for us, is we want to be able to give the free users out there an opportunity to try these tools out and not have it cost anything. And that's one big thing that's varied a lot from traditional CAD. Traditional CAD, if you wanted to generate toolpath or if you wanted to run a render, it often meant you had to go out and buy these tools, these very expensive tools. You couldn't pay as you go, so to speak. You couldn't, just use them for a short amount of time. And so it's really key that, with Onshape, we're kind of changing how these pricing schemes evolve, and we're really hoping to push towards, everyone having some kind of free offering and a pay-as-you-go type approach. Now I'm going to cover, some specifics about how the different pricing schemes work in a bit, but that's a very important thing to point out. You should be able to go in and try these apps out, whether it's, computation hours or 30 free days or number of documents you're able to do. Each has its own limitations, but they all have something to offer for free. Okay, so that is the Onshape App Store in a nutshell, right? It's a marketplace for you to find all the Onshape apps in a single location. So what are the different app types? And this is an important thing to point out as we start getting into the actual app stores. Well, there's 3 different types. We have what we call integrated cloud apps, right? And these apps actually integrate directly into Onshape. They're just another tab in your document, just like drawings or assemblies or parts. So you have integrated cloud apps that are just another tab. The interface and everything's built into Onshape. Then we have connected cloud apps. Now, connected cloud apps allow you to connect to another cloud-based service. So, for example, we have another partner, SimScale, that runs finite element analysis in the cloud, right? So you can run structural analysis or fluid dynamics in a browser, and they've integrated their app with ours via a connected cloud app. So it's another web-based service that connects to your Onshape account and allows you to run studies on your Onshape designs, on your Onshape models. So those are connected cloud apps. And then we have connected desktop apps. Now, connected desktop apps are a traditional desktop installed application. The difference here is it allows you to connect to your Onshape account. Right? So if I have a traditional rendering application installed locally, or if I have a CAM application installed locally, I can now connect to my Onshape documents and easily pull those down. So connected desktop apps, think of a traditional installed application that connects to the cloud data in Onshape. So those are the different app types. And I wanted to point them out because I'm going to show you an example in a bit of the authorization and setting them up in just a moment. But let's jump into it here now. What I'd like to do is first, of course, show you how to get to the Onshape App Store. And that's going to be the first thing. And in your document page, when you first log into Onshape, you're going to see a little icon in the bottom left corner here. Go to App Store. Okay, very simple. You click Go to App Store, and it takes you into the Onshape App Store. Now, in my case, I was logged in. You'll be prompted to enter your username and password. But after you've done that, you'll be taken to the App Store. And as I mentioned before, the idea behind the App Store is bringing everything together in one place. So the first thing you'll be greeted with is a list of all the apps. Very simple. We have a number of different apps. I'm going to go through just briefly an example of each one. But the important thing to point out is, the first thing you see when you log into the App Store are the apps. Right? You can scroll through them and check them out. So just starting from the top, just briefly here, as I mentioned before, there's a wide variety of different app types. And you'll see the different app types here in the top right corner. So here's a connected desktop app. This is an integrated app, and this is a connected cloud app. Right? So you see the different types of apps. You'll also see you have a sort option to sort by app type. You have filters, very similar to the documents page in Onshape. You have filters on the left, and you also have a search here on the top. Right? So I can search by app name. I can search by or filter by categories. And we have a number of different app categories. So analysis, think of finite element analysis or fluid dynamics, visualization, rendering applications, CAM applications, manufacturing. Maybe it's sending STL outputs to your 3D printer, or bill of materials management or data management. So lots of different categories. I'm going to walk through the apps here in just a second. In fact, let's do that now. So as I mentioned before, you log into the App Store, you're greeted with your apps. Now, there are a number of different apps. I'm going to walk through them just briefly here for a moment. We have SimSolid, which is a great finite element analysis, structural analysis app that allows you to connect directly to your Onshape documents. So again, structural analysis, same goes for Simulation Hub. This is fluid dynamics. It's an integrated app that's built right into Onshape, and it's just another tab in your browser. I mentioned SimScale earlier. This is a connected cloud app, so you can run structural analysis in a browser. It allows you to connect directly to your Onshape documents, and you can run those analysis again without heavy machines or complex equipment. We also have a 3D PDF exporter, a great tool that allows you to export free 3D PDFs, up to 10 free, I believe. ExactFlat, very common in the industry. If you need to send out a flat pattern for maybe materials or things like that, you can use ExactFlat. DriveWorks, another very popular one for design automation. So a great tool if you're building variations in your design, you want to automate that process. Another one, InStep. This is a very commonly asked question if you need to import or work with polygon or mesh data. STLs in particular are very common. InStep is a great application to do that. Print Now is a great tool that allows you to print right from within Onshape, and it sends it off to a printing service, and you can get the printed part as early as the next day. So a great printing service that's worth checking out, Print Now. PinShape is a 3D marketing place, 3D printing marketing place where you can upload your designs and share them. Visual Import is a free application, and the neat thing about Visual Import, it has CAD applications but also CAM applications. So you can generate toolpath with Visual Import, and it allows you to connect directly to your Onshape data. Now, Mastercam, probably one of the industry standards in the CAM world. We can now connect directly to Onshape from within Mastercam. We have slicing tools, Grid Space Slicer for 3D printers. Also, a CamWorks connector. So if you're using CamWorks, you have a way to connect directly to your Onshape documents. Another very popular one, in particular these two, are part libraries. So a common question they get is, how do I find nuts and bolts or washers? Do I need to model those things? Both of these apps will give you that. We have Trace Parts, which has hundreds of millions of parts available to you to download for free. And we have Solid Parts, and these are actually native Onshape hardware. So very neat apps, definitely worth checking out, especially if you do a lot with nuts and bolts and washers and standard hardware and you don't want to model it. It's easy to use these apps and pull those models down for free. We also have bill of materials apps. Our own Lou Gallo wrote a bill of materials apps that integrates directly with Google Sheets. So you can generate a bill of materials in Google Sheets. We have one that integrates directly into Onshape, right? 3D print preparation. This is a great tool for analysis or wall thickness. If you're really worried about your printer or your print not ending up correctly, this will give you some indication of whether or not you'll have any issues. We have a tool to track billable engineering hours, a time cards tool, an explode utility, and a number of different render tools. A lot of great render tools. One Render, an integrated app built right into Onshape, allows you to render in the browser. Another integrated app is Claro.io, another great render app built right into the browser, as well as Reality Server. So these are all really professional grade rendering applications that are integrated into a tab in your document. So definitely worth checking out. They're all free, and you can get in there and start playing with it very easily. We also have some connected desktop apps that are specific to rendering, and these are again very big names. So Maxwell Render and now has an Onshape connection or an Onshape connector, and the same thing goes for KeyShot. So you can now get directly to your Onshape documents from within KeyShot. SimLab Composer, same thing. Another connected desktop app, great for creating those really awesome high quality renderings. The last two here, the second to last is Power Surfacing. Now, Power Surfacing is a free form modeling tool. It's a great application if you need to create, very complex shapes. If you need a sub D, style surface modeling tool, Power Surfacing is great, and it integrates directly with Onshape, so you can transfer data back and forth. It's a neat application. The last one in my list is Sim4Design, and this is another integrated app. It's built right into Onshape, and you can actually run finite element analysis in, again, another tab in your document. So real quick rundown of all the different app types. The one thing I want to point out is this is our launch. We just announced this. We're going to have a lot more coming, but really exciting to have all these big name companies in the App Store right off the bat. Right off just at launch. So those are the different app types. Now, different apps. Now I mentioned the different app types. That's connected desktop apps. We have integrated cloud apps and connected apps. The next things I want to get into are, the different types of payment methods. Now, many of these apps are entirely free, and it just depends on the app. You need to look into the app and figure out, what it is, that they're offering for free, and then where does the point where you need to start paying come in. Many of them are altogether free. Some, of course, have paid options as well. What's worth pointing out is many of these are following a lot of the Onshape pay-as-you-go pricing model. So, for example, and the example I like to give is the very last one here, Sim4Design. Sim4Design, you pay for the computing hours, right? So unlike a lot of traditional FEA where you have to spend $10,000 to $15,000 just to get started, with Sim4Design, I can spend $25 and render, or run a relatively complex analysis and not have to have that big initial investment. So definitely worth pointing out. There's a number of different pricing schemes, and it all depends on how that vendor wants to sell their product. Another one that I'd like to point out is SimScale. This one is a great solution if you're looking for a browser-based FEA tool, right? So, okay, so some questions. When will Onshape be available for mobile devices like iPads and iPhones? Onshape app is available today for both iPhones and Android devices. So forgive me if I misunderstand the question. You can go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the Onshape app today for free and connect to your Onshape account and even build models. So definitely check that out if you haven't downloaded the Onshape app yet. A question. What about privacy? If I subscribe to an app, does that company get my email address automatically? And in many situations, a lot of these are associated with an account. So an example would be SimScale, where my login is associated with my email address. Yes. That being said, many of these require you to authenticate with a certain username or email address. So they will have that information. It's important to point out, these are reputable companies. We're strongly vetting them internally, so you know, it's they're something you can trust, and that's definitely something I want to point out is these have been tested internally very heavily, and something that we take very, very seriously, of course. Another question: advanced kinematics. Forgive me, I'm not sure if we have an advanced kinematics app yet. One question, just to reiterate from earlier, regarding the privacy, only if the app asks for personally identifiable info will you be asked, for an email address. So it's not in the situation of every app. Now there are some, like I give the example of SimScale or even Simulation Hub, that are based off of a username and password to log into their service. So it will depend on the type of app. All right, so moving on. Now, I mentioned there are a few other different payment methods. SimScale is one that's of course free, but another that I always like to point out is everybody has their own approach to where they define what they want to give out as a free application. In this case, 3D PDF is another very popular capability. A lot of users want to be able to take their models out of Onshape into a 3D PDF and maybe put them on the web or put them, embed them in a document. You have this capability, and with the 3D PDF exporter, you have 10 free exports. So you can export up to 10 free models without paying a dime. And so it allows you to use it and even test it and try things out. And if you do a lot of 3D PDF exporting, it's a pay-as-you-go model, right? Pay per export pricing model. So again, it's very similar to the example I was showing you earlier where I'm based on compute hours. This is another scenario where you get a number of exports. Now, some apps altogether just have a very similar either monthly pay-as-you-go subscription model or just a standard flat-out rate to buy the software. So there are apps that follow a traditional payment method, but I think a lot of them you'll see are adapting that pay-as-you-go approach. Okay, so moving on. I want to walk you through an example of installing and authenticating each of the different app types and really how to use them. So one of the first things I want to point out is, to get to an app, let's say, for instance, I wanted to use SimScale, for example. I'd select SimScale, and you're going to see an option to get application. Now, Get Application is going to take you to the SimScale site. In this site, remember, in this case, SimScale is a cloud-connected service. It's another service that connects to Onshape. So I'll be taken to Get Application. Now, in the case of integrated apps, let's go to Simulation Hub, for example. You'll see an option to subscribe or cancel, depending on whether or not you're currently subscribed to that app. So it really depends on whether it's an integrated or cloud-connected app. To get to the app, of course, you can left-click and Get Application. That will take you to their site. In the case of a connected desktop app, it'll take you to where you can download that application, right? So you can install it locally. So getting the application, pretty straightforward. You can click Get or Subscribe. You also have a description of what the app does, some product screenshots. You also have reviews in many cases. So just keep in mind that there is quite a bit of detail here about what the app does, how it works, the pricing model, and so on when you actually left click on it. Okay, so let's walk through this. Now, in this case, let's first start with one of the easiest, and that is, of course, something as simple as an integrated app. So I could choose a number of different apps here. Let's do 3D PDF Exporter. Right, so I choose 3D PDF Exporter. I click subscribe. Okay, and it takes me to a confirmation. I say yes, I'd like to get this for free. Confirm with my password. And now I've subscribed to that app. Right, so integrated apps, very simple. You hit subscribe. It asks you to authenticate. You say yes, okay, and then you're subscribed to the app. Right, I get a little window telling me the details of how to use it, but that's really it. Right, that's all it takes to subscribe to an integrated app. Now, using it is a bit different. I'm going to go over that in just a second, but just subscribing to it, that's all it takes. You click subscribe. It asks you to make sure, to confirm and to enter your password, and you're good to go. You have the app. Now, in the case of, for instance, a connected desktop app, when you click on it, it's going to take you to the site where you'll download their app. So that's a different process altogether, and then you'll connect to your Onshape data, which I'm going to cover in just a second. Good question. What does the free subscribe mean and how I would use the app? As I mentioned before, all of these will have a free offering, so you can subscribe to any app for free. What will happen is, in some cases, some of the apps that aren't free unlimited use, you'll reach some limitation, whether it's compute hours or number of documents, where you'll then need to either subscribe or pay in some form for the app. But initially, as a trial or as a number of documents or as a number of hours, you will have some free access to subscribing to the app. And as I mentioned before, if you're just doing things here and there, you may never subscribe to the app. But if you find yourself using it more and more, it'll be worth it to, of course, subscribe. All right, so I mentioned before connected desktop apps. If I click Get Applications, it's going to take me to where I can download, in this case, SimSolid. But any connected desktop app is going to behave in a very similar fashion. It takes me to their site where I can download their application. Now, in the case of something like SimScale or the bill of materials generator that we showed you just a second ago, both of these are cloud-based services, so you're connecting to another cloud service. So I'd like to walk you through an example of that. But those links will take you to that service where you can create your account, right? And that's the key thing there. So let's walk through this. Now, the connected desktop apps, they take you to their site. The connected cloud apps will also take you to their site where you can create an account. The integrated apps are built right into your document. So let's jump into an example of that first. So here I have a standard Onshape document, right? And what I want to point out about this is, now that I've added a few apps, how do I get to them? How do I start an integrated app up and get it working and start interacting with it? And you could do this a few different ways, but the way I like to point out, this is the method, but you can get to the App Store a different way here as well. But the Create tab menu. So in the bottom left corner, you have Create tab and Add Application. So once you have integrated apps, you'll see Add Application. You can also go to the App Store from here. There's a link to it here, and add more apps. But this is how you start it. So it's very simple. I can select the 3D PDF Exporter, for instance, and run through it, or Simulation Hub, or any of the integrated apps that I'd like. So integrated apps, very simple. Again, as I mentioned before, it's really just a tab in your browser. So as I select Simulation Hub, for instance, it just launches another tab in my document. So the entire experience is built into Onshape. Now, I mentioned before authentication, and this is an important step in the process. As we're going through this, each app needs to authenticate with Onshape so that you can pull in your data to that app, right? The app does not have unfeathered access to your Onshape account. You need to grant it access to your Onshape account. So we do that with OAuth. It's a very common web authentication method that allows us to authenticate you and give that app permission, right? This is an important step because each app will need permission. I'm going to go over in a second how we can authorize, or how we can revoke. But authorizing is very simple. You click authorize. In the case of an integrated app, it's all done automatically, right? And then I can log in and start building a new simulation right inside of the tab, right? Create a simulation and start running. So it's very easy for me to, start digging into simulation or any of these integrated apps because it's literally just a couple of clicks and I'm off and running. The important thing I want to point out again is the authentication. You will see a screen the first time you use the app to authenticate the app. And that's necessary so that the app can import your data and work on it, run a study or render or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Okay, so that's an integrated app. And as I mentioned before, you launch it from the Create tab menu, you choose your app, and it starts a new tab in your Onshape document. You start working. Now, in the case of cloud-connected apps and desktop-connected apps, the authentication is just a bit different. So I'd like to show you an example of each one of these. The first is a cloud-connected app. And I mentioned before, and I've shown it a few times, but SimScale is a cloud-connected app. It runs in the browser, and it connects to your Onshape documents. Right? So this is another tab where I have SimScale up. I can choose the import. Right? So I've already created a SimScale account. I've logged in. I choose import from Onshape. Right? And so this is the integration with Onshape. I choose import from Onshape. Now it's important to point out that immediately what you're going to get is a window to authorize or to authenticate. Right? Very important part of the process. You must authenticate to allow it to run, right? And then it will load and allow me to choose the document that I'd like, right? But very important thing to point out, you must first authenticate the app, even in the case of a cloud-connected app like SimScale or like the Bill of Materials tool that Lou generated. You have to be able to say, yes, you're able to connect, okay? So that's SimScale. The key thing there, when you first try to import, it's going to ask you to authenticate. The same thing goes, by the way, for a desktop connected app. So there are a number of these. I want to show just one just to show you the general process. Just understand that, whether it's the Mastercam or CamWorks or KeyShot or any of the other desktop installed apps, the process is going to be very similar to this. So here's KeyShot, for example. And what I'd like to do is, of course, connect to Onshape. Right, so this is a desktop installed application. This is running on my local MacBook here, and I want to connect to the cloud, to my Onshape account, and render a model from there. Right, so I choose Connect to Onshape. Now here is where I get the authentication prompt. Now it's on a different monitor, so forgive me. Let me drag it over here. So here is the authentication. I've had it automatically pop up in a browser window. It's asking me, please authenticate KeyShot connection to your Onshape. I say, okay, authorize. It gives me a code, and then I'll take that code and paste it into KeyShot. Okay, that authorizes it, and now I'm able to open. In this case, we can open up the log RAPL here and start to render. Right, so now I'm connecting to the cloud with a locally installed application. And the important thing there is, again, the authentication process. The first time you try and connect, it's going to ask you, to authenticate, and you'll need to keep an eye on that. And in the case of a desktop installed app, you may have to do a copy and paste of a code to get it to correctly show. All right, so that's really what I had planned. Now, there is one last thing that I want to mention about apps in general, and that's how we handle their permissions. So I mentioned before, authorization. You're authorizing each app. What if I want to revoke that authorization? And you can do this from the Manage Account settings. So in the top right corner, you'll go to Manage Account. You'll see Applications and all the apps that have authenticated with your login. And you can revoke permission for any one of these apps. So very important thing to point out, for instance, KeyShot. If I wanted to no longer allow KeyShot, maybe I stopped using KeyShot or I stopped using one of these apps, I can revoke the permission to it. So you can go in and say, I no longer want to allow access for this app from the applications page. Now, in the case of integrated apps, you can go in and also cancel plan, and that will accomplish the same thing. It's very important to point out that the revoke, that I was showing you just a moment ago that's in the applications does not cancel any financial agreements that you may have. It strictly severs the connection between the apps, right? So very important thing to point out, you can revoke the connection, the authentication, but it does not cancel any kind of arrangement that you may have with payment. So it's very important to point out, in the case of many of these apps, you'll also need to cancel the plan, especially integrated apps, canceling the plan. Okay. Good question. How do you approve new apps? How do you ensure that they work as promised? This is something that we do a lot of testing internally on. So there's a process that we go through internally of vetting an app before it's available for the end users. And all of these apps have gone through that process. So we've actually been testing these apps for quite a long time now. And all the new apps that are coming will also follow in that same QA process of being tested beforehand. So there is an approval process to the App Store. Question: I don't want an app to have access to all documents, just the one I want to use. Is this possible? And the answer is no, not today. Now, it's important to point out again, we've vetted these apps, and privacy is very important to us. So if there's anything, happening that would be, considered mischievous, we would absolutely not allow it. But we will have something like this in the near future. So just keep that in mind. When you authorize an app today, it will allow you to see all the apps in your document. That's how the Keyshot connector works, for example. But we will have that capability in the very near future, so hopefully soon. Okay, so just looking over my list here, let's see if I missed anything else. Again, that's really what I had planned. I'm going to stick around and answer any questions that you have, so feel free. I have just a few last slides for you. If you're just getting into Onshape, we really encourage you, try Onshape in your professional environment. Let us know what you think. Now that we have all these different apps, Onshape really is an ecosystem that can do just about anything that you'd need to, not just build your CAD model. So really try Onshape out and let us know. There's a feedback tool that's built into Onshape. It's very easy to give us feedback, and we really encourage you to do so. Also, invite others and share. There's a share dialogue. There's an invite others button in the documents page. It's very easy to invite someone else to Onshape and to share your document with them. So feel free to try it out. It's definitely one of the biggest benefits of Onshape, all the collaborative capabilities. The last thing I want to mention is if you've been using Onshape a bit and maybe you're interested in meeting local users, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to help you set up and get your own user group up and running. So that's what I had planned. I'm going to stick around and answer any specifics. So again, feel free to type them in. But that's it, everyone. Thank you and have a good day.